As we get geared up for the Super Bowl 1 week from now, we have to get through one last important pit stop before the big game. It's award season, baby. It's time to bring up who we think deserves specific honors for the 2023-2024 season, and I thought it'd be fun in today's video to go over who I personally have for each significant award. And I must say that for some categories, the race is fairly close, and there's a lot of different takes to have, so I'd love to hear what your opinion is down in the comments below if you think it's different than mine, as again, there's a lot of arguments that can be made for these specific awards. So without further ado, let's talk about what my awards are, and we're going to start with the most valuable player. Now, this award has gone through a lot of transitions this season. It's felt like a lot of different people have been the front runner at one point or another, and a lot of it simply has to do with football generally being on the decline in terms of the level of play. I feel like we saw a bit of a dip in how people performed, and there was just a lot of sloppiness in general, especially from quarterbacks. A lot of the league's elite quarterbacks had some rough stretches, and their offenses weren't as dynamic as you'd see in years prior, and of course you can't forget about the number of significant injuries on top of it. This is the first season in a long time where it feels like you can genuinely make a case for a player outside of QB. And in general, there's been like 4 or 5 different quarterbacks as well who have been in this discussion. And in the end, I believe with how up and down it's been for QB play in general, that the award should be going to the most consistent player this season. And that player is Christian McCaffrey. In my opinion, he has been the most consistent performer in the NFL this year, especially on the offensive side of the ball. He has been dominant from start to finish. He has taken over a majority of the San Francisco 49ers games, or has been a huge part of their game plan. He's made the life of his quarterback a lot easier. He's tied for the most total touchdowns in the NFL with Raheem Mostert. He's the only player in the league to reach 2,000 yards from scrimmage. He was without a doubt the best running back in football. And in general, I think that he has a big leg up over these quarterbacks who have taken turns going through good stretches followed by unimpressive stretches. Now, I understand, quarterback is the most important position in the game. That's what you need if you want to find success. If you don't have an elite quarterback, you're never going to make it, or at least not usually. They're usually the ones that deserve to win the award when it's all said and done. But again, in a year like this where QB play has been down so bad, and the numbers don't really stand out for a lot of guys, McCaffrey is able to take a leap forward, and I think he deserves his flowers. Just because this usually is a quarterback-centric award doesn't mean you have to force-feed it to one when it feels like there aren't a lot of standout candidates. Somebody like McCaffrey is a standout candidate. He plays running back, yes, it's a dying position, sure, but he's one of the only guys that you can truly say is elite, that deserves the type of money that he's getting, that is dominating in ways that nobody else can truly replicate. Christian McCaffrey has been on a different level this season, and I believe he has meant everything to the 49ers being the second best team in football when it comes to record. Now, a lot of people believe that Lamar Jackson should be the front runner for this award, which I think is understandable, and a case can definitely be made for him. His touchdown to interception ratio was pretty good compared to a lot of other QBs this season. He had over 800 yards rushing. The Ravens had the best record in football. All good arguments to be made. However, I think that he more so had other people clear their names out of the hat by having bad performances, rather than him elevating himself above these guys. People like Dak and Purdy and Hurts, they had their fair share of bad games to destroy their cases. Meanwhile, I think Lamar benefited from being on the best team in the league, usually something that a quarterback will be attributed to regardless of how they played, and on top of it, his numbers aren't super amazing. Yeah, he did have that touchdown interception ratio, like I said. I give him props for that. But we're acting like 24 touchdowns and 3,600 yards is some kind of outstanding accomplishment. We've seen a lot of quarterbacks do this. That is an average day at the office. And honestly, some QBs on worse teams put up better numbers in terms of the passing game. And compared to his last MVP season, it's just not as good. That year he had 36 touchdowns and 6 picks, and he had over 1,000 yards on the ground. His numbers effectively went down this year compared to that one. And I think a lot of why the Ravens were good was more so their defense rather than an elite offense. Yes, it was strong, but without the defense being top 2, arguably top 1 in the league, they're just not going to be what they are, and I think people are giving Lamar too much credit for that. He didn't have that stunning, groundbreaking year like back in the day. Like, it was a good season, don't get me wrong, but I think people are giving him a bit too much credit in that regard. And I'm not just saying that because they choked in the playoffs. I've had this mindset for a long time now. I never thought that Lamar deserved the award. Probably the best quarterback in terms of the conversation, but I don't think he's the best fit. In my opinion, I think it's Christian McCaffrey. Another shout out goes to Tyreek Hill. I also thought he was on a good trajectory for a while. I thought that maybe if he reached that 2,000 yard mark, that would have been enough, but he slowed down after a while. He had a couple of not as good games down the stretch, and that effectively put his name out of the hat. Next up, we're going to move on to Offensive Player of the Year real quick. Once again, going to give this to Christian McCaffrey. Basically, just rinse and repeat what I said for his MVP case. 2K yards from scrimmage, tied for most touchdowns, most rushing yards in the league, best running back by a country mile, integral to the 49ers' success and their ability to find rhythm and pick up big plays, both with the pass and the ground game. He just set everything up so well and was a great all-purpose player that could do a little bit of everything. Nobody found more value offensively than Christian McCaffrey to me, so pretty easy choice here. Now for Defensive Player of the Year, where I might end up taking a bit more heat. For a lot of people, this award comes down to Myles Garrett, TJ Watt, and in some cases, for some fans out there, Micah Parsons. In my opinion, Micah's stats don't really compare to Myles Garrett and TJ, so I'm going to be focusing on those two. I believe that both have good cases for different reasons. Myles Garrett, on one hand, was part of arguably the most fearsome defensive unit in the regular season with the Cleveland Browns. They put up some of the lowest yards per game we've seen in recent memory, especially in like the first half of this year. They were lights out in so many of their matches, and clearly he was the guy leading the way, and statistically he had a great year. I mean, 14 sacks is awesome, he had 4 forced fumbles, he had 17 tackles for loss, 30 QB hits, and apparently the highest approximated value according to Pro Football Focus, so congrats in that regard. If they gave this award to Myles Garrett, it'd be very understandable, and I wouldn't complain that much. However, I believe that the person who should be winning this is TJ Watt. When I think about individually who is the most valuable player on defense, for me, it's just gotta be TJ with how dominant he was, the force he was, and how much he uplifted a Steelers team that was otherwise mediocre on defense. The Steelers, statistically, when it comes to yards given up, were on that bottom half. They were 21st in the league. So take out TJ Watt and think about how much worse they could have been. They had a lot of brutal games, but TJ was able to save them on more than one account. If he doesn't come in and do his thing, that Steelers defense might be like bottom 5 in the league. I kid you not. And statistically, compared to Myles Garrett, just better by every metric. In my opinion, people maybe focus a little too much on the narrative and what Cleveland were this season, and not enough at the pure numbers, as TJ Watt was once again the sack leader in the NFL, the third time in his career with 19, more than Myles Garrett. He had 68 combined tackles, he had 36 quarterback hits, and let's not forget about the 19 tackles for loss, or the 4 forced fumbles, the 3 fumble recoveries, including one for a freaking touchdown, the interception he had this season, and of course the fact that he had 8 passes defended, which is one of the highest on his team as an edge rushing linebacker. The athleticism, the versatility, the dominance. TJ Watt felt like he was everywhere, but not enough people appreciate that because the Steelers were such an unenjoyable team to watch. But part of the reason a lot of those games weren't blowouts to begin with was because him and his defense were somehow keeping the team in the game. Him in particular was such a giant playmaker that opened the game wide open for a mediocre Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph to somehow win games. I think he deserves more credit than Myles Garrett, who played on a better defense overall. TJ had to uplift his team a lot more, and in my opinion, that's just greater value. Hence why I think TJ Watt is Defensive Player of the Year. Anyway, let's shift our focus over to the rookies. We actually had a pretty awesome rookie class overall, a bunch of people that I'm excited to watch for years to come. For Offensive Rookie of the Year, I ended up being very torn. And I decided, because I am an absolute fence sitter, that I'm going to do a tie between CJ Stroud and Puka Nacua. It's hard for me to give credit to one guy more than the other when they both had such magnificent seasons. I'm gonna sound like a hypocrite because I'm kind of buying into the narrative a little bit here, But CJ Stroud, I mean, he took this Texans team to the playoffs. They weren't expected to be anywhere near the postseason. People commonly had them bottom 5 in their preseason power rankings, and he took them to 9-6 in games that he played. He missed a couple of games this season, and that was still enough to get this Texans team to the playoffs in the end, including a big match where he won in Week 18 against the Colts to get them there. And when you look at the numbers, he was 8th place in the league in passing yards. He had 23 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. As a rookie, having that kind of efficiency is amazing. And had he played all of the games this season, there's a realistic chance that he could have finished with the most passing yards in the league as a rookie. He had the decision-making of a veteran out there. It was so impressive to watch. And this Texans team isn't exactly rocking a lot of talent. They seem to have found some good receivers in Tank Dell and Nico Collins, but they shared a bunch of different injuries throughout the year that made it even harder for the Texans to find success, but CJ just kept doing it and doing it and doing it. He had so many massive games where he'd come in clutch. He never seemed phased outside of a couple select games, and I was thoroughly impressed. He seems like he is going to be a franchise quarterback for decades at the rate he is going. He is an awesome talent, and the fact that he led this weak Texans team to the playoffs in the first year of a rebuild is more than enough to give him this type of honor. But I can't just ignore Puka. I mean, bro. As this random guy that I never even heard of coming into this year, we're talking 105 catches as a rookie with so many other great players on that offense. Almost 1,500 receiving yards. And with those marks, he broke both the receptions and receiving yards rookie records in the NFL's history. And in particular, that yardage one is absurdly impressive as it lasted for over 60 years. I think that him and CJ both did some amazing things, and I just can't pick between them, hence why I'm going with a tie. Next up, Defensive Rookie of the Year. This one is a bit harder in terms of just picking a guy in general, as I feel that the offensive rookie class was a lot more impressive than the defensive rookie class. For most people, it probably comes down to either Jalen Carter or Will Anderson Jr. Both guys, I think, had ups and downs, and I do like both of them. I think both of them have very promising careers ahead of them, but in the end, I decided to go with Will Anderson Jr. for having a very strong end to a season, and for generally just being a bit more consistent throughout the year compared to Jalen Carter. It hurts to say this as a Giants fan, but I really like Jalen, and I think that he is going to have a more prominent role for years to come on this Eagles team. He'll get more starting time, and he's going to dominate more games as they improve on that side of the ball. But Will Anderson from start to finish just had more impactful games. Jalen went quiet at times this season. He had some great games, he had some awesome stretches, but during the time when the Eagles were losing in particular, he felt almost invisible out there. Not all his fault by any means, the Eagles were literally collapsing, but that's just the nature of how it goes. Will, I just think, had a bit more consistency. Will had more chances to go out there and prove himself, and he definitely took it, having some big games down the stretch for this Texans team to eventually make it into the playoffs, again, when they really weren't supposed to be there to begin with. Now, their numbers are eerily similar, I won't even lie to you, so in a world where Jalen Carter plays more, he probably takes this award no problem, but that's unfortunately not the reality we live in. Will had a bit more chances, he seized them, and that's that. Next up is Comeback Player of the Year, where I've seen a lot of debate and controversy between specific football fans in the community, and in a certain way I can kind of understand it. From a specific point of view, you maybe more so view this award as a football-centric thing, and you want to give it to somebody who had better stats that made more of a difference on the field. However, I just think you have to give this to Damar Hamlin, as his story goes beyond football itself. This dude literally almost died on a football field. We almost lost this guy playing the game that he loves, and yet he was able to miraculously recover and come back the next season and play. Granted, he didn't play a lot, but the fact that he was back out there as a professional is a miracle in itself, and the definition of what it means to make a comeback. I mean, in a lot of people's eyes, they'd probably have quit football right there and then if they player in DeMar's shoes. So the fact that he comes back, despite the dangers of this maybe happening again, is really cool. It's a great story. It's a miracle. And it's the definition of what this award should be all about. For the people who are more about guys who actually play and make a difference on the field, you should more so think of this as like the most improved player award rather than the comeback player of the year. They should be their own separate entities in my eyes. And if you were to give it to somebody, if you were to give it to a player that showed a lot of progression compared to last season, or many seasons where they were just down in the dumps, Baker Mayfield would make a lot of sense. It reminds me a lot of Geno Smith, getting that chance at life again to prove himself and being a starting quarterback and taking off with it. This might have been Baker Mayfield's best season as a pro, or at least his best in a very, very long time. Statistically, he put up some excellent numbers, the best of his career for sure, and he led the Buccaneers to a playoff berth, which is absolutely incredible considering the Bucs were not supposed to be there at all. I give Baker a lot of credit for coming back and showing a strong performance when everybody wrote him off. And lastly, ending the video is Coach of the Year. Another one where there's a couple of guys that are very deserving of it. One guy that I have really loved has definitely been DeMeco Ryans. I've talked about the Texans story extensively throughout this video already, but I mean, he's a first-year coach. The Texans had very low expectations with a rookie quarterback, the first season with their franchise guy, and they were able to not just make the playoffs, but win their own division. An unbelievable story, and you'd have to believe a lot of it has to do with him figuring out the keys to success, unlocking the potential of his players, and being a motivator that they want to play for. However, in the last week or so, I've shifted my tune, and I more so believe that the winner of Coach of the Year should be Kevin Stefanski. Cleveland had a very up and down year, so many highs and lows, and yet when it was all said and done, they were able to ride through the storm, win 11 games, and make the playoffs. Now, it's true that the Browns had a significantly more talented roster with more guarantees than a team like Houston, and in a lot of people's eyes, they're like a top 15, maybe even top 10 team in the league when it comes to their roster, but the Browns had to go through so much adversity, and that's a big factor that you just can't overlook, and it's something that should hold a lot of weight when talking about an award like this. They won games, they had a stable defense and all, but this was not an easy fight for them. Because for one, their quarterback situation was horrendous. I mean, they had like 5 different quarterbacks play for them at some point this year. And most of them were mediocre at best, if not hot garbage. And on top of it, they lucked into a miraculous Joe Flacco turnaround for like 4 games or whatever it was. And yet, when it was all said and done, they didn't just win 11 games, but they won a bunch of super close ones. I mean, against good teams as well, pulling out these games by the skin of their teeth with clutch game-winning drives and all. And a lot of why that's possible is definitely good coaching. The teams that have good coaching staffs are able to figure it out and make the right decisions and the right calls in tight matches like that. And the fact that he guided so many different quarterbacks to getting the job done the way they did, even if it wasn't always the greatest, I mean, that's just awesome to see. Again, a lot of it has to do with the defense and how amazing they played to set up the offense, but still, you got to figure out a way to coach these guys to execute when it matters. You're down Nick Chubb, you're down multiple quarterbacks, and yet you still figure it out anyway. That is grit, that is determination, that is the next man up mentality, and making a system work for your team. The Browns faced so much adversity, and it made them a stronger team and a clutcher team in the end. And for that, I give this award ever so slightly to Kevin Stefanski. And that'll do it, my friends. That is, in my opinion, who should win all of the 2023-2024 NFL awards for the regular season. Let me know what you think down in the comments below and who you would pick for all of these awards as well. And of course, make sure to like this video and subscribe if you're new for more NFL content every single week.